Your car's been acting strange lately. Maybe it cranks over but won't start, or it starts fine but suddenly dies while you're driving. You might be thinking it's the battery or maybe the fuel pump. But here's what mechanics don't always tell you first. It could be a tiny sensor most people have never heard of, the crankshaft position sensor. And when it goes bad, it can leave you stranded at the worst possible time. But here's the good news. You can diagnose this problem yourself in the next few minutes, and if it is the sensor, I'll show you how to replace it without paying a mechanic $200 to $400. Let's figure out if this is your problem. Before we dive into the symptoms, let me explain what this sensor actually does, because once you understand it, everything else will make sense. The crankshaft position sensor, sometimes called the CKP sensor, is a small electronic component that monitors your engine's crankshaft. The crankshaft is that long metal shaft inside your engine that converts the up and down motion of your pistons into rotational power. The sensor sits close to a toothed wheel called a reluctor ring, and every time one of those teeth passes by, the sensor sends a signal to your car's computer. These signals tell the engine control unit exactly where the crankshaft is positioned and how fast it's spinning. Your car's computer uses this information to control two critical things: when to fire the spark plugs and when to inject fuel. If the sensor stops working properly, your engine loses that precise timing, and that's when the problems start showing up. Now, here are the 9 symptoms that point to a failing crankshaft position sensor. If you're experiencing several of these at once, you've probably found your problem. Symptom number 1 is trouble starting your engine. This is usually one of the first signs. You turn the key and the engine cranks over like normal, but it takes longer than usual to actually fire up and run. Sometimes it might start on the second or third try. This happens because the sensor isn't sending consistent signals to the computer, so the fuel injection and spark timing get thrown off. At first, you might think it's just a weak battery or old spark plugs, but if your battery is fine and the problem keeps happening, especially after the engine has been sitting for a while, the crank sensor should be on your list. Symptom number 2 is the engine stalling without warning. This one can be dangerous because it happens while you're driving. Everything seems fine, and then suddenly the engine just cuts out. No warning, no sputtering, it just dies. This usually happens when the sensor completely stops sending signals for a moment, and your engine control unit has no idea what to do. The computer basically panics and shuts everything down. You might notice this more often when you're accelerating to merge onto a highway or climbing a hill, times when the engine is working harder. If your car has stalled on you more than once without any obvious reason, pay attention to the other symptoms on this list. Symptom number 3 is rough idling. When you're stopped at a red light or sitting in park, the engine should idle smoothly at around 600 to 800 RPM. But if the crankshaft sensor is failing, you might feel the engine shaking or vibrating more than normal. The RPM needle might bounce up and down, going from 500 to 900 and back again. This happens because the sensor is sending incorrect or inconsistent data to the computer, which then struggles to maintain the right fuel and air mixture. Your car might feel like it's about to stall even though you're just sitting there. The whole vehicle can shake, and you'll definitely feel it through the steering wheel and seat. Symptom number 4 is engine misfiring. A misfire means one or more of your cylinders isn't firing at the right time or not firing at all. You'll usually notice this as a jerking or stuttering feeling, especially when you accelerate. The engine might feel like it's hesitating or holding back. Sometimes you'll hear a popping sound from the exhaust. Misfires happen because the crankshaft sensor isn't telling the computer the correct position of the piston, so the spark plugs fire at the wrong time, fuel gets injected when it shouldn't, or it doesn't get injected when it should. This creates incomplete combustion, and that leads to those rough, jerky movements you feel. If you're finding this helpful so far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep making videos like this that can save you hundreds of dollars at the shop. Alright, let's keep going. Symptom number 5 is your check engine light coming on. This is probably the most obvious sign, but it's not always the first one you'll notice. When the crankshaft sensor starts failing, it triggers a diagnostic trouble code that turns on your check engine light. If you have an OBD2 scanner, you might see codes like P0335, which specifically points to the crankshaft position sensor circuit. You might also see P0336, which indicates an issue with the sensor's range or performance. Sometimes you'll get misfire codes too, like P0300 for a random misfire, or P0301 through P0308 for specific cylinder misfires. Even if the light isn't on yet, if you're experiencing other symptoms from this list, it's worth scanning for codes anyway, because sometimes they're stored in the system even before the light appears. Symptom number 6 is poor acceleration and hesitation. When you press the gas pedal, the car should respond immediately and smoothly. But with a bad crankshaft sensor, there's a delay. You press down and nothing happens for a second. Then the car lurches forward. Or it accelerates for a moment, then hesitates like it's not sure what to do. This happens because the sensor is sending unreliable data, so the computer can't adjust the fuel and spark timing quickly enough to match what you're asking for. During hard acceleration, like when you're trying to pass someone or get up to highway speed, this problem becomes really noticeable and frustrating. Symptom number 7 is worse fuel economy. If you've noticed you're filling up more often than usual, a failing crankshaft sensor could be the reason. When the sensor isn't working right, your engine can't burn fuel efficiently. The computer might inject too much fuel to compensate for the bad signals it's getting, and a lot of that extra fuel doesn't get burned completely. It just goes out through the exhaust. Over time, you'll see your miles per gallon drop, sometimes by 10 to 20%. You might also notice a strong smell of gas from your exhaust, which is all that unburned fuel making its way out of the system. Symptom number 8 is unusual smells from the exhaust. Speaking of smells, if you notice a sulfur smell, like rotten eggs, or a really strong gasoline odor coming from your tailpipe, that's often related to incomplete combustion caused by bad sensor signals. That unburned fuel can also damage your catalytic converter over time, which is an expensive repair you definitely want to avoid. The sulfur smell specifically means your catalytic converter is working overtime, trying to process all that extra unburned fuel, and it's starting to struggle. Symptom number 9 is the engine won't start at all. This is the final stage when the sensor has completely failed. You turn the key, and the engine cranks normally. The starter sounds fine, but the engine just won't catch and run. This happens because without any signal from the crankshaft position sensor, the computer has no idea when to fire the spark plugs or inject fuel. Everything is just random, and your engine needs precise timing to run. If you've been ignoring the earlier symptoms and now your car won't start, there's a good chance the crank sensor is done. So, how do you confirm it's actually the crankshaft position sensor? The easiest way is to use an OBD2 scanner. You can pick one up for around $25 to $50, and it plugs into a port usually located under your dashboard on the driver's side. Turn your key to the on position without starting the car, and the scanner will read any trouble codes stored in your computer. If you see P0335 or P0336, that's pointing directly at the crankshaft position sensor. You might also want to visually inspect the sensor itself. The location varies by vehicle, but it's usually mounted on the engine block near the crankshaft, sometimes by the harmonic balancer at the front of the engine, or near the transmission bell housing at the back. Look for any obvious damage, cracks, or oil leaks around the sensor. Now let's talk about how to fix this in 9 minutes, or close to it. The actual replacement is pretty straightforward, and you can save yourself $150 to $300 in labor costs by doing it yourself. The sensor itself usually costs between $30 and $100 depending on your vehicle. Here's what you'll need: a socket set, probably a 10mm socket for most cars, and maybe a wrench if the sensor is in a tight spot. You might also need a flashlight and some patience if it's buried deep in the engine bay. First, make sure your engine is cool. Disconnect the negative battery cable. This is important for safety and to reset the computer. Next, locate your crankshaft position sensor. If you're not sure where it is, check your owner's manual or look it up online for your specific make and model. Once you find it, you'll see an electrical connector plugged into it. Press the tab on the connector and pull it off. Now, remove the bolt or bolts holding the sensor in place. Most sensors are held in with 1 or 2 bolts. Carefully pull the sensor straight out. Sometimes they're wedged in pretty tight, so you might need to wiggle it a bit. Before installing the new sensor, compare it to the old one. Make sure they look identical. Clean the mounting area on the engine block if there's any dirt or oil buildup. Slide the new sensor into place, and hand tighten the bolt first to make sure it threads in smoothly. Then snug it down with your socket, but don't over-tighten it. These sensors can crack if you force them. Plug the electrical connector back in until you hear it click. Reconnect your battery cable. Start your car and let it idle for a minute or 2. The computer will relearn the sensor's signal. If you have a scanner, you can clear any old trouble codes now. Take your car for a test drive. Start in your neighborhood, just normal driving for about 10 minutes. If everything feels smooth, no stalling or rough running, head out on the highway and see how it handles at higher speeds. If the car runs normally, accelerates smoothly, and doesn't throw any new codes, you've successfully fixed the problem. The whole job usually takes anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, depending on how accessible your sensor is. Some vehicles have it right out in the open, while others hide it behind other components. Either way, it's one of the easier sensors to replace, and you just saved yourself a trip to the shop and a big labor bill. If this video helped you diagnose or fix your car, check out our next video where we cover the symptoms of a bad camshaft position sensor. It causes similar problems, and sometimes both sensors can fail around the same time. Thanks for watching.